family! I can't believe we're already in the new year, but the holidays aren't over yet. There's a very special person to remember this month. On January 15, 1929, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was born in Atlanta, Georgia. He was an activist and minister famous for his nonviolence beliefs during the 1950s civil rights movement. Now, the civil rights movement is a movement where communities of color protested against segregation in America. Segregation is when people are separated based on their differences. In the southern states, that meant people with different skin colors could not use the same things. For example, people of different races were not able to attend school together or use the same bathroom. How crazy is that? In fact, segregation was considered legal in the South through a law called Jim Crow. Jim Crow laws were a set of laws that enforced separating people by their skin color. As an African American growing up in the South during the 1930s and 40s, Martin Luther King Jr. saw and felt the unfairness toward himself and his community. Despite this, he didn't give up and he continued to work hard. And because of that, can you believe Dr. King was accepted to Morehouse College at just 15 years old? Oh man, was he smart. It didn't stop there. After earning a bachelor's degree from Morehouse, he studied at Crozier Theological Seminary to become a minister. Dr. King would then finish his schooling at Boston University, earning the highest degree possible, a doctorate degree. Although people who earn this degree are called doctors, it's a bit different than a doctor that studies medicine. Dr. King studied religion. Within that same year, he was asked by other activists to lead his first protest. In Montgomery, Alabama, it was considered illegal for people of color to ride in the front of the bus, and they were not even allowed to be bus drivers. Hey, that's not fair. To make a change, Martin Luther King Jr. led a boycott. A boycott is when a group of people decide not to use a company's services as a form of protest. In this boycott, Dr. King and his community decided to not ride the buses in Montgomery, Alabama, which meant the bus system would lose a lot of money. The nonviolent boycott lasted 382 days. That's over a year long. The boycott succeeded in putting an end to the unfair law for the public bus system and became the moment the United States began to see Martin Luther King Jr. as a leader in the civil rights movement. Dr. King continued to believe that nonviolent protests would be the best way to bring attention to the injustices communities of color face. And he was right. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, the media followed Dr. King's protests and showed the issues that existed in the southern states to the world. Martin Luther King Jr. was becoming so influential, local governments sent him to jail multiple times for peacefully protesting. It was difficult standing up for what was right, but Dr. King didn't let that stop him. On August 28, 1963, Dr. King led one of the biggest marches during the Civil Rights Movement. It was called the March on Washington and took place in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. About 250,000 people joined the march to support the demand of everyone's basic human rights being viewed as equal. Whoa, look at all of those people! It was during this march that Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his most famous speech. His I Have a Dream speech called for the end of racism and the enforcement of civil and economic rights for everyone, not just one group of people. The march and speech was so successful that they led to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The Civil Rights Act prohibited discrimination against others. The progress keeps a-coming, baby. Not long after the Civil Rights Act, Martin Luther King Jr. became the youngest person at the time to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. The Nobel Peace Prize is an award given to a person who has made an extraordinary difference in their nation or the world. You earned it, Dr. King. Martin Luther King Jr. was not only a symbol for the civil rights movement, he showed us that we are all capable of making a difference, no matter who you are or where you're from. Because of his great impact, we now celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day every January to remember the amazing things he did for us. We'll never ever forget you, Dr. King. Well, family, It looks like we've come to the end of this episode. Remember to be kind and treat others with love, just like Dr. King would. And I'll see you next time. Hey.